All right, welcome to the golf course. We're going to learn some great shots today. We're going to learn how to choose the right club around the green, which can be really tricky when you're learning how to play. Before we do that, though, I want to go into a review. This is something that I'll do at all levels because I want to make sure everybody's dealing from a right premise to know how to make that fundamental motion so we can make that solid contact. So let's go ahead and go into a review, and we'll be right back. What I want to do is talk for a few minutes about how to get good contact and how to learn the basic chip shot. Now, this shot we're going to learn is the one you're going to be using probably 80% of the time around the greens. You may be using some different clubs for the different situations, but we want to have that good contact and the good technique to rely upon. Now, I want to talk for a couple minutes about what happens to help us make good contact on a full shot, and then we'll talk about how it relates to chipping. In a full shot, if I were going to take this 9-iron and blast it into the north 40 there, what I would do is I would go ahead and make my backswing, and then in order to make good contact, I'm going to have a couple of movements. One of them is going to be my weight is shifting onto my left foot, my belt buckle is turning to face the target, and the handle of the club will be slightly in front of the ball at impact. These movements occur throughout a nice full swing. Here you can see it in slow motion. My weight is shifting onto my front foot and the belt buckle is turning toward the target. You can also see that the handle of the club is slightly in front of the ball at impact. That helps me to catch the ball first and then the turf. Now, in a little baby shot like this, though, I don't want to have to move so much. So what happens is I'm going to go ahead and set up in that impact position already. So let's take a closer look at that impact position. Here it is, weight on the left foot, belt buckle facing the target, and the handle slightly in front of the ball. Now all I'm going to do is to go ahead and move my feet, and now I'm in a chipping stance. The ball is just about off my right toe now, and that's about what you're going to use as a reference point. I should have 85 to 90% of my weight on my left side with the handle in front of the ball. I'm now in an impact position already, and all I have to do from here is swing the club back and forth. Now, my contact is not guaranteed, but I'm well on the way to making that good solid contact. Now, let's imagine that I'm standing incorrectly for a moment and look at that motion. Most people, when they struggle with their chipping, they're in trouble when they start because they haven't stood correctly to it. So what that usually looks like is the stance a little bit wider with the ball in the middle of my feet or maybe even a little bit forward. If I add to that weight on the backside or even equal, that's not going to have me forward enough to hit the ball first and then the turf. So what happens is the club now skims the ground this way. And in contact, in making that good solid contact, we have to hit the ball first and then the turf. So if I were going to stand this way with the handle straight up and down and the weight evenly distributed, I would have to make a big move to get into the right impact position. So what I want to do is stand in that position already so that I don't have to move so much during the shot. Now, of course, stance isn't the only factor here, so I want to talk a little bit about how to swing it. The muscles you use to move the club back and forth are very important on this shot. Basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to swing the club back and forth with some movement of my body, a little bit of extra weight shift, and a little turn. Even though I've started that way, I'm going to add a little bit to it through the motion and the swinging of my arms. So you can see that my arms move here as I play this shot. The muscles I do not want to use are these muscles, the muscles that push the club forward throughout the swing. In fact, these muscles are never used in this game on any shot. No drive, chip, putt, nothing. It's never used. So what I do want to use, though, something's got to move that club. So really what I'm going to do is I'm going to shift my weight a little bit extra and swing my arms back and forth. You can see here when I do that, the club basically gets dragged into impact a little bit. So it's not pushed on back here, making the club brush the ground early. If it doesn't catch the ground early, it'll be rising on impact and catch the middle of the ball. So if I use those muscles, I'm in trouble. I want to go ahead and move myself a little extra onto my front foot and go ahead and let my arms swing back and forth. You can see here that the club just trails into impact. Now that's going to give me a certain look on the finish which is really one of the fundamentals, and that is that at the finish of contact, this triangle between my arms and the club is still intact. So in other words, I haven't pitched the club forward this way. And one of the things about that position is that people hear that you're supposed to do that, and then they freeze it like a stone on the way through, trying to hold this position on the way through. Well, that's not quite how it works. If my wrists are very, very soft when I'm swinging my arms back and forth, well, now the club trails. As I come into impact, it hits, and I actually get a little resistance from the ground. Because I haven't added these muscles at the end of the stroke, the finish actually looks like that. Let's go ahead and take a quick look at it. Swinging it back and forth with my arms. A little bit of body motion, and there's that triangle that I'm looking for. Here again in slow motion, take a look at this change of direction. You'll see some body movement, my weight flowing just a little bit more onto the left side, and my arms swinging the club forward. I'll tell you, the stance and making use of those good muscles on this shot, it's huge to contact, and if you can get that contact down, you can master this shot. Welcome back. You know, that might be worth the price of admission right there. Knowing those fundamentals and how to make that shot so you can make the solid contact is absolutely huge. Now I want to go over for a minute just a little review about those muscles, what moves the club, to make sure that you're crystal clear on the motion. This is absolutely huge when playing the shot, so that you're not trying to propel the club with the wrong muscles, if you will. When I swing the club back and forth, you can see here, even on this little shot, I do have some movement. This is very important. I've got to move my body, because if I don't move it with my body, something else will. You know what? It'll be my wrists. So this type of motion where someone swings with wrists only, that's because nothing else is moving. Something's got to move the club, so my wrists will go ahead and kick in, and now it creates an impact where the club is rising on the way through, catching the ground early often, and rising and catching the top of the ball sometimes. So using the right muscles, if you will, I've got to sort of find those other muscles then if it's not going to be the wrists. So you can see here that if I have a little weight shift and a little movement of my body, that also brings my arms along for the ride, and now the club comes along for the ride as well. So that helps me to catch the ball first and then the turf, just like that. So that's very important. If you're going to err on a shot like this, by the way, you want to err by moving too much this way. Never would you want to move in this direction, even if you were to move this way, where you actually moved what might feel like too much. That's better than not moving at all. So soft wrists and body movement.